everyone, my name is Ryan Cam, and welcome back to The Road to Wolfman, where I'm covering every Universal Studios Wolfman film in honor of Wolfman coming to theaters in a couple of weeks. I've covered The Wolfman and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, link in the eye in the right-hand corner, do check that out. But for right now, let us get into what Boris Karloff referred to later on as the Monster Clam Bake, House of Frankenstein. This was directed by Earl C. Kenton, and it is technically the third Wolfman film, even though he's not really in it that much, but we'll get to that. To describe this movie is a bit tricky, so I'll do my best. Basically, there is a doctor named Gustav Niemann, I believe I said his name right, played by Boris Karloff, who is a huge fan of Dr. Frankenstein and is trying to replicate his experiments and so stumbles upon not only the body of Count Dracula, played in this movie by John Carradine, but also the Wolfman and also Frankenstein's monster. So, yeah, I have so many questions because at the end of Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, it's heavily assumed that both Wolfman and Frankenstein's monster both died at the end. But you'll quickly realize with the Universal Monster series, death is like a light fog to these monsters, so they just shake that off. Just like what I talked about with Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, the backstage machinations are way more interesting than anything going on screen. The pitch for this movie was supposed to be called Chamber of Horrors, and basically a big ol' monster mash with Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Jr., of course, returning, and Bela Lugosi returning, but then with the additions of such actors as Peter Lorre and Claude Rains. However, Chamber of Horrors never went into production. However, the idea of this big ol' monster mash stayed. Screenwriter Kurt Siodmak, who had been instrumental in the Universal series up to that point, basically said he wrote the draft for this movie, but never wrote the screenplay, and he never saw the film. And it kinda shows. Also, I learned that this movie was supposed to have the mummy Karras, not the mummy from Boris Karloff's The Mummy, but the traditional bandage-wrapped, slow-walking with a limp mummy from like Mummy's Hand and Mummy's Curse. However, the Karras plot line was later dropped. Like I said, backstage stuff way more interesting than anything going on here because what goes on here is just kind of not there really. This movie's weird in that the stuff with this Dr. Neiman and his hunchbacked assistant trying to replicate Dr. Frankenstein's works are way more interesting than anything that the Wolfman is doing. Like, Lon Chaney Jr. is barely in this movie, it feels like. It feels like he's just there because, the Wolfman is a name, so we got to include him. I mean, this is technically a sequel to The Wolfman. I mean, I looked it up, so it's true, but like what was he even doing there? That's my question. Being said though, Boris Karloff is the best part of this movie. He said in an interview shortly before this that he would never play Frankenstein's monster again. He was just done with it. And he would say something to the effect of many people have tried to play the monster and the edge has been taken off. And he was kind of right about that. But him playing a mad scientist, I thought was a nice little callback because him playing the monster in the original, now he is the guy creating the monster. It's a nice callback, in my opinion, anyway. Carradine is an acting legend, and of course, like, he's a horror legend. And honestly, his stuff was great too. And there's a lot of scenes where he is involved, and he's just great. Bela Lugosi is awesome as Dracula in this Universal series, but John Carradine is not as good as, but he was getting close. Like John Carradine should have gotten his flowers. In terms of it being a Frankenstein movie, it's not that bad. My issue with it is that you have the Wolfman here, so why not give him something interesting? It literally just boils down to Larry Talbot saying, I want to die. Like, please somebody help me accomplish this mission. He like creates silver bullets in order to do it, and he sort of kind of dies at the end, but of course, as we all know, he survives that. So it's rinse, lather, repeat, rinse, lather, repeat. It's nice to see Lon Chaney Jr., though. He is predictably good. And on another note, before I move on, Glenn Strange is good as Frankenstein's monster. He had been an extra in westerns and in horror up to that point, and I found out in my research that he pretty much hated the makeup and it just pretty much sucked for him to be in it. Not just to be like in it, but also because he wasn't allowed to eat with the rest of the cast, like when they took lunch together. And it's a bit of a shame because he felt like, well, I just guess I just don't want to disturb anyone. It's really sad because from what I've read, he was a nice guy. He just, you're in that suit all day. So it's like hours to put it on and hours to take it off. So it's just a shame, really. Like Strange did a very good job with the role. Not nearly as good as Karloff, but what this role called for, he succeeded. All told, this movie is pretty forgettable. Like the acting is carrying the weight of this movie on its back, and Karloff, Chaney, Glenn Strange, they're doing their jobs, and the ending is actually pretty good, but it's pretty much undone in House of Dracula, and we will get to that. But you can just tell that Universal were just plain running out of ideas. And just, you can only like go back to that well so much before you just have to go, what's even the point anymore? I pass it off to all of you. What did you think of House of Frankenstein? Let me know in the comments. I would love to read what you have to say. And speaking of House of Dracula, that is next up on the road. It's the road to Wolfman, and my next up is House of Dracula. My name is Ryan Cam, and I'll see you in the next one.